So were you involved in Unsolved first as a producer or as a music supervisor, or both?
They came to me, actually both. And so I have enjoyed this hybrid of being a producer on the show as well as a music supervisor. And it just has been an incredible ride. Quite an honor, because I had the pleasure and the honor and kind of a rare look at Biggie and Pac, because I knew both of them. So it was an opportunity for me to kind of pay tribute, pay homage to them. And I think when Anthony and Kyle, Anthony Hemingway and Kyle Long and Mark Taylor came to me and I sat down with them. First off, I go back to when I got an email at about 6 a.m. Because Anthony Hemingway doesn't sleep. And I opened up my email and a picture of Biggie pops up and it says, "This is a true story." And so I was in, you had me at hello. And so for me, it was an opportunity because I really look at that period of the 90s and the fact that this show was able to pivot between 1993 and 2007. It was a really rich time in music, particularly in hip-hop music. And working with the music and the sounds and the feeling and the vibe of two iconic hip-hop artists.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you basically had to tell the story of Tupac and Biggie without their music because their estates are very restrictive about licensing their songs and everything. So how did you work around that?
I never went into it, quite honestly, expecting to get the music. Mm-hmm. Having known and watched their relationship as friends, I didn't expect to be able to get the music, and sort of had the foresight to say, okay, if we can't get it, and out of respect for the estates, what do I do? And I knew that it had to have an authentic sound. It had to connect to their legacies. It had to connect to the moments, and it had to connect to the tragedies. And so for me, it was an opportunity that was very rich to be able to go back and pull that hip hop sound, that thump, that bass, that rhythm, the style, but also to be able to explore other musical genres of that period. And also to be able to, for me, having known a lot of the people that were behind the music that gave Biggie his sound, like Easy Mo Bee, tapping into producers like him that I had relationships with, tapping into legendary West Coast producers like Battle Cat, tapping into proteges of Dr. Dre like Irvin E.P. Pope and 1500 or Nothing, that camp of guys that now do a lot of production work for Bruno Mars. Also, Mike City, who was a producer who did a lot of the Bad Boy music. So that, to me, laid the foundation for the authenticity that I would build on. And I went to those sounds, but I also went to sounds from Three Doors Down and groups that really, I gave, much like a composer would give each character a sound. I painted a picture and wanted to have a tapestry of the sound of each character in the series. And so they trusted me and really gave me the freedom to be able to create a palette of sounds from the era. And that was the really exciting and fun part of doing the show. And so at that point, it didn't matter whether I got the actual music or not. I wanted to pay tribute because you still had a mother who was still living. This is a very painful time still. Every day, thinking about this murder is unsolved. Right? You still have a family that's left behind. So I felt like if I could pay tribute, and the beauty was when we were able to get Mopreme Shakur, Tupac's brother, on board, and to be able to go into his vault of music, things that he and his brother had created or had begun to create and things that never had gotten released. I also, in being in the ability to call up a lot of those folks that I had relationships with, those original producers like Easy Mo Bee, who had really given Biggie his identity and his sound, I didn't need to go and get the actual songs when I could go get the guys and the folks that had really laid the foundation to help those artists get their sound.
Yeah, there's still a link to them.
Absolutely.
But I feel like ultimately it was a blessing in disguise, because you're kind of just focused on the story at hand. You're not distracted by like, oh, like their music, like it's playing right now.
Yeah, it really was an opportunity. And like I said, I was so happy that really Anthony trusted me and Kyle trusted me as the creator and Anthony as a visionary to go off and sort of create all of this and to pull in those sounds. So it really didn't matter at that point. And so, the other side of it is Anthony knew that I could bring another level even from a musical standpoint to the storytelling, because not only having been personally around Biggie and Tupac, but I wanted to tap into being able to pull music into the show. If you never heard hip hop before, if you didn't like hip hop, I wanted to give viewers, something to connect with. And really make viewers feel invested in these stories that we were telling throughout the 10 episodes. I also was there the night at the Peterson when Biggie was murdered. So to be honest, when we went on the location scout, and as I was there, I sort of saw where the bar was, and I remembered where Biggie was and where Puffy was when I saw them that night, and we hugged, and then going out to the valet and pulling out my ticket and hearing the shot. So I wanted to recreate the excitement and the happiness and the celebratory aspect of that night and what it was supposed to be before, the score sort of brought in the emotional and sort of tragic side of it. And so the way that I always approach things is I feel like it's not about picking songs. It's about how do you tell the story through music? How do I work in tandem with a composer? How do I help the dialogue come to life? And so that night, I wanted to tap into that with playing Tribe Called Quest or playing Montel Jordan and really sort of make people enjoy the moment.
Like bring it back to their
Absolutely, before the tragedy.
In the first episode, we see the rap battle between Biggie and Tupac.
Yeah.
So how much of a part did you play in that, constructing that?
What was really great is that, again, I go back to the authenticity and the freedom to be able to really create and having that flexibility with the show and the trust from my executive producers. So Harvey Mason Jr. was, we brought him on to be a part of the mix, and so it was a wonderful experience to work in Harvey's studio. And as I literally approached this as if I were A&Ring the show. And so I went after when I called up Easy Mo B and I said, why would I not go to the Well, the guy who laid the architecture for Biggie? And I said, I know you got a lot of stuff in the vault, and let's tap into it. This is an opportunity, the things that you never got to play for Biggie or that you were planning to play for him, and things that were a timeless sound, but that would connect with that era. And so in that pilot episode, when that rap battle happened, I also knew that we had to have rap lyrics. And so Dub C, who is Ice Cube's counterpart in their rap group, he became a consultant on the show, and really I like to call him my cultural consigliere. He was one of the rappers when, for the Tupac character, we had to have that sort of authentic West Coast sound, that sort of the drawl of the tongue, the style of rap for West Coast is quite different than East Coast. And so we tapped into him, and when I told Anthony, we've got to have when we have those West Coast lyrics for Tupac, because Mark Rose, who played the character of Tupac, was not a rapper, whereas Wavy Jones, who played Biggie, auditioned on a YouTube based on what he had seen on social media, and he literally never tried to be Biggie, but he carried the spirit of him. I mean, his tonally everything, his cadence. And so there was a lyricist that I had remembered from New York who had a really tough time getting a record deal because he sounded so much like Biggie, and he kind of looked, he was from Brooklyn, and so he ended up going over to gospel rap. But he is like a brilliant writer, writes with the same sort of cadence, the style, everything of Biggie. And so I pulled him in as the lyricist to work with Wavy. It turns out, coincidentally, he had been this kid's mentor when he was a very young kid, rapping and growing up in New York City.
It's meant to be.
So you're right. So it was like very spiritual, bringing all these people together that had no idea they were going to be a part of this. And so they wrote the lyrics. I literally would call up Easy Mo B and say, because primarily we were really doing the sounds for the Biggie character. And so for that pilot episode, I said, I need a really, really strong drive-in, very much where it can feel like the 90s, but it be this timeless, raw hip-hop sound. Just give me raw bass lines, very, very hard grooves, and let me hear what you got. So he would send me track after track, and most of the time with Easy Mo B, because he just is this legendary guy who had done everything from Biggie's music to Miles Davis. Most of the times, after like one or two tracks, I didn't even have to hear the rest of them. And I heard that track and I knew that was that. So I played it for Harvey Mason. He was like, that's in the pocket. And we got Wavy Jones in the studio. We got Mark Rose in the studio, and Dub C worked with them, and J.E. Cooper, who wrote the lyrics primarily for the Biggie character. I would call him up, I'd send him the track, and then I would say, give me some lyrics. This is thematically what they have to be about. I need you to speak as if Tupac and Biggie were friends, and this is their moment, and give me the camaraderie, give me just the connection of a cipher in a room full of young guys and young girls, and that real era of hanging out, just vibing, and he delivered every time.
It's a great scene. You can see like the mutual respect between them two when it's over. Yeah,
I think it really captured their friendship and what I know that they had in real life because they were friends.
So during Tupac's death scene, Don McLean's Vincent plays, which is actually the last song he heard when he died. Yeah. So how important was it for you to get the rights to that music? What was it kind of like, we need that no matter, like, money is no issue?
It became money was no issue. But I would, the way that I always approached things was because I had sort of built up a stable of producers separate of what our composer, Joe Trapanese, was doing. I literally was kind of A&Ring a circle of about 5 producers, and that included, Battle Cat, Easy Mo B, 1500 and Nothing, as I said before, Irvin E.P. Pope, and Mo Preem Shakur. And so that my camp was sort of over here creating that. And so that would help me offset as I would switch to business mode when I knew that we couldn't just go out and I couldn't blow that episode on getting $100,000 worth of songs. I used a lot of those tracks that were in those guys, their wheelhouse, so that I could save up no matter how much Vincent was going to cost. And I'll tell you a little secret. Had this idea, which really was a very cool idea because Jimmy, who is on the show, Jimmy sings, and he plays Detective Poole.
Jimmy Simpson.
Yes, Jimmy Simpson, who's amazing, just an amazing talent. And so one night I was talking to Jimmy, and we may have been at Sundance, and I said, Jimmy, do you know Vincent? And he said, yeah, I do. So he recorded it on his iPhone, and I really wanted Jimmy's voice because I felt like there was this weird connection with Poole, and for him to die, Russell Poole in real life, trying to solve this case, I tried to sort of bring in those eerie moments, and I thought, wouldn't it be cool if it were Jimmy that were actually singing that?
Well, he's on his deathbed.
Yeah, and so I couldn't get it approved by, the songwriter. He wanted it, but it was okay. So we had saved up. I could blow the whole wad on that if we needed to. And we actually didn't. He was very reasonable with us, but it made for such a powerful moment. And, you know, in that episode, I mean, to have really, I tried to a lot of times use the music that people have heard in the samples, because I also wanted to use this as a time to educate this sort of new generation of, you know, hip hoppers who think they know old school. You know, everybody's walking around now sort of with throwback outfits on, but I tried to use this as a moment to kind of educate young hip hoppers on this is where it came from. It came from Joe Sample's, you know, track, or it came from, you know, and so I really wanted to use those real songs. Even in the opening, when you see the mother character, Afeni Shakur, working in her garden and hearing Natural Woman, things that really connect to the spirit, quite honestly, of a Black mother who had struggled, and kind of played tribute to what that dynamic was as a mother who had raised a single woman who had trials and tribulations. So I always tried to have the music touch the texture of who these people were in real life.
Mm-hmm. So the show hasn't been renewed for a second season yet, but it's an anthology series. So would you be involved in season 2?
I sure hope so. I think so. I think I had a really, really great relationship and a trusting relationship. And so whichever direction that Kyle is going in, I know he's in the lab, you know,
he's thinking of the next.
Thinking of the next. And we've talked about it, and I just adore him. And, you know, Anthony is... The great thing about this show is that this was all coming full circle. The very first show I did was at Universal, which was New York Undercover, and I really helped design the musical landscape of that show. And so Anthony Hemingway, who is now Mr. Emmy Award winning, you know, he was a PA, and I was a baby. I was 24 when I did that show and did all that music, and we were just flying by the seat of our pants. And back then, Dick Wolf trusted me. So all these years later, we had been planning on working together throughout the years, and it happened finally. There was another project we were supposed to do, another one, but this is where it happened. So, you know, I'm in it for the long haul, and I was back at a great studio that gave me my start.